You're 19 years old when the Army decides what your life will look like. Not with a dramatic speech, not with a heroic ceremony. Just a quiet decision made by a recruiter staring at your file. He studies your shoulders, flips a page, then points to a column on a form. Armor. You don't argue. You don't ask questions. You press your fingerprint on the paper, receive a serial number, and someone hands you a worn duffel bag with another soldier's name scratched out. 3 days later you arrive at Fort Bliss, Texas. And that's when reality begins. The desert sun doesn't negotiate. It simply crushes everything under it. Flat land stretches to the horizon in every direction. Dust floats through the air like it belongs there. It gets into your boots, your ears, even your food. Then you see it for the first time. An M1A2 Abrams. 73 tons of steel and firepower. At first, it almost looks unreal, like something out of a movie. But your sergeant quickly reminds you this isn't a movie. You're not here to admire it, he says. You're here to serve it. Your first role is the loader. On paper, the job sounds simple. Grab the round. Swing it into place. Ram it into the breech. But the round weighs over 100 pounds. And you have 4 seconds to do it. 4 seconds while the tank is moving. 4 seconds while someone is shouting coordinates. 4 seconds while the turret shakes from the recoil of the last shot. On your first day, you drop the round. The metal hits the floor with a heavy, embarrassing clang. Your crew chief doesn't yell. He just looks at you with that quiet disappointment only soldiers understand. You pick it up again. Your back burns. You try again. Weeks pass. The heat inside the tank climbs past 100 degrees. There's no air conditioning. Every reload feels like lifting a small engine block. At night your hands shake from exhaustion. Your bunkmate Marcus shows you a trick. Take your fingers every morning. He says the breach has taken fingers before. You don't ask how many. You just start taping. 40 days later everything changes. During a live fire exercise the tank suddenly turns while you're mid-reload. The movement should throw you off balance. But somehow it doesn't. You stay upright. The round slides perfectly into place. The gun fires. A target nearly 2 kilometers away disappears in a cloud of smoke. Your crew chief says nothing afterward. But for the first time, he stops watching your hands. And that's how you know you've earned your place. 2 years later you become a driver. The promotion feels less like recognition and more like responsibility. The driver sits in the lowest position inside the tank. A small compartment barely big enough to breathe. Your world becomes 3 periscopes and a thermal display. You guide 73 tons of steel through terrain you can barely see. If the tank takes a catastrophic hit, statistics say the driver rarely escapes. No one says that out loud, but everyone knows it. Your instructor, Sergeant Elena Vargas, teaches you how to control the Abrams massive turbine engine. It doesn't stall, she explains calmly. It just stops. At first, you don't understand the difference. Later you will. Driving a tank isn't about pushing pedals. It's about understanding terrain. Mud that pulls at the tracks like it's alive. Slopes that can flip the vehicle sideways. Mistakes here don't just cost time. They cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. During week 3, you roll a track in a simulated creek bed. It takes 6 hours to repair. 4 of those hours you spend underneath the tank in thick mud, handing tools upward. When it's finished, Vargas finally speaks. You steered 2 degrees too wide. That's all she says. 2 degrees. You never make that mistake again. At 24, you become the gunner. Now the main weapon belongs to you. You sit beside the breech surrounded by screens and controls, laser rangefinders, thermal optics, ballistic computers, technology that can detect a human figure nearly 2 miles away in darkness. But machines don't make decisions. People do. Your instructor, Master Sergeant Philip Okafor, explains it simply. The computer finds targets, he says. You decide what happens next. Your first live shot is perfect. The round leaves the barrel faster than the speed of sound. The armored target downrange vanishes. But Okafor doesn't congratulate you. That was the easy one, he says. Later during a simulation, everything slows down. You identify a vehicle through a dust cloud. You line up the shot. Your finger tightens on the trigger. Okafor freezes the screen. What did you see? He asks. You describe the vehicle. He replays the footage. It's not an enemy vehicle. It's a medical transport. Dust had covered the markings. You sit with that realization for days. That moment teaches you the most important rule of gunnery. Accuracy isn't the hardest part. Judgment is. By the end of training, you score one of the highest qualifications in your battalion. Okafor hands you your certification. You're dangerous now, he says quietly. Just make sure you're dangerous to the right people. At 27, you become a crew commander. Now the tank isn't just machinery. It's a team. For soldiers inside one armored shell, each depending on the others. Your loader is incredibly strong but stubborn. Your driver reads terrain like a map. Your gunner reacts faster than anyone you've seen. You realize something important. Leadership inside a tank isn't about shouting orders. It's about listening. Your unit trains in the Mojave Desert during a massive exercise. 3 hours into the scenario, one of your allied tanks is destroyed in a simulated ambush. During the review, your superiors ask why you hesitated 14 seconds before ordering a maneuver. You answer honestly, I wasn't sure. The instructor nods. Uncertainty isn't weakness, she says. What you do with it is. You learn patience. And patience keeps your crew alive. At 29, you command 2 tanks instead of 1. Now tactics matter. 2 vehicles moving in coordinated leaps. One firing while the other advances. You and your wingmen learn to move like chess pieces across the battlefield. During an exercise, you face a larger enemy force. Doctrine suggests holding position. Instead, you exploit the terrain. Your partner engages from one direction while you flank from another. The maneuver surprises the enemy unit. The evaluator studies the footage carefully. That wasn't by the book, he says. You shrug. The terrain didn't read the book. He marks your report. Tactically innovative. Years pass. You command a platoon, then a company, then an entire battalion. The scale grows larger each time. For tanks become 14. 14 become dozens. Eventually, you're responsible for hundreds of soldiers. But the lesson never changes. Tanks don't win battles. People do. Machines amplify discipline. They amplify training. But the real weapon is the human mind behind the controls. By the time you reach brigade command, your decisions influence thousands of troops. Entire armored formations move based on your intent. In modern warfare, the battlefield is chaotic. Communications fail. Plans fall apart. During one major exercise, electronic warfare shuts down your radio network. Your battalions are suddenly operating blind. Instead of waiting for communications to recover, you make a risky decision. You push authority downward. Every commander acts on the last guidance they received. For 2 hours, the battlefield moves without centralized control. When communications return, something surprising happens. Your northern battalion has already seized its objective ahead of schedule. Decentralized leadership worked. Your superior reads the report and asks one question. Was that deliberate? You answer honestly. Yes. She nods slowly. Good. Because next time it might fail. Leadership at that level isn't about certainty. It's about responsibility. Eventually, your career reaches its final chapter. 35 years after you first arrived at Fort Bliss. There's no dramatic farewell. Just paperwork. Your access card stops working. Your name disappears from meeting lists. The Army simply continues moving forward, just like it always does. You wake up one morning at 5 a.m. out of habit. But this time there's nowhere you have to be. And that's when you start remembering. The nervous 19-year-old who dropped his first shell. The loader taping his fingers every morning. The driver covered in mud under a broken track. The gunner who almost fired at the wrong target. The commander learning to trust his crew. All those versions of you still exist. They're the reason you made it this far. You realized something important then. Leadership was never about rank. It was about responsibility. Rank only measured how far you had to travel to understand that. The tanks you commanded will eventually be replaced. New machines. New crews. But the lessons remain. Discipline. Judgment. Trust. Those don't retire when the uniform comes off. They stay with you forever. Because in the end, the tank never moved because of steel or engines. It moved because someone inside it believed in the mission enough to move first. And that someone was you.